Okay, let's start this deep dive with a really foundational idea. If you look at anyone who achieves, any kind of sustained success, the person who actually executes on their goals, the one who doesn't feel constantly overwhelmed, you find there's one thing that comes before everything else. It's not talent, it's not connections, not even market timing. It's this singular element of pure, disciplined mental control.
It is. And mental control isn't some kind of bonus feature. It's the operating system.
Mhm.
If you try to run complex, demanding software, say building a business or mastering a skill or even just maintaining a healthy relationship, if you try to run that on a corrupted, unstable operating system, the whole machine is going to crash. It doesn't matter how powerful the hardware is. The mind is where the battle for success is always, always won or lost.
And that brings us to the universal hook, I think. It's the question that really drives this whole conversation. Why do we consistently and really systematically sabotage our own focus? I mean, why is it that so many smart, capable people wake up and find their mind is already in charge? It's just pulling them immediately into worry and doubt and this frantic overthinking before the day's even really begun. It's like a loss of internal sovereignty before you've even had breakfast.
That phenomena, that's the core crisis of intentional living in the modern world. Waking up and finding the mind already running wild. We're conditioned, through habit and just the sheer volume of information that surrounds us to start every single day in a state of reaction, not intention.
Reacting to what exactly?
Reacting to yesterday's unprocessed stress, maybe, or the notification that's waiting on your phone, the fear of what might happen tomorrow. We let the default setting of the human brain, which is survival, repetition, and seeking comfort, we let that dictate our entire trajectory.
And the stakes here are just monumental. Because if you don't seize control, the research is so clear on this, the mind just defaults to the path of least resistance.
It does.
And that path it's paved with excuses, with comfort seeking, with repeating the exact same patterns that kept you stuck yesterday. It's a self-perpetuating loop of regression, not growth. It's guaranteed.
And that presents the essential choice, which is what the material we looked at really analyzes. It's vivid.
Yeah.
The mind is either your greatest tool, perfectly sharp, perfectly directed, or it becomes your biggest enemy. It becomes a source of internal static and confusion. The moment you establish control, you stop that enormous leakage of internal energy.
What do you mean by leakage? Like a friction?
Exactly. The friction that's caused by doubt and second-guessing and all that needless worry, once that static stops, clear choices can actually follow. And those choices lead directly to purposeful action. This is the difference. It's the difference between a life of intentional design and a life of, psychological default.
So if the default is chaos, the starting point has to be this kind of radical self-awareness. But, most people think they are self-aware. What does the psychological reality of this crisis actually look like?
It's subtle, but it's devastating. Most people simply never truly analyze what they are thinking about. Their minds are on autopilot, engaging in this constant, exhausting mental chatter.
Can you give me an example of that chatter?
Sure. Think of the internal time you might spend on comparison with others, or the endless loop of worst-case scenarios you run through, or even just replaying a frustrating conversation from last week over and over. This systemic lack of self-awareness means the individual feels perpetually weak, unclear, and unconfident. They often ask, "Why don't I feel strong?" And the answer is that their entire internal narrative is actively and relentlessly weakening them.
Right, it's that constant internal noise, that narrative track that's draining the battery, but people just treat it like background sound they can't turn off.
It is the ultimate leakage of power. You simply cannot feel capable or powerful if your consciousness is filled with thoughts that fundamentally weaken your position. Thoughts of inadequacy, fear of future failure, or dwelling on past mistakes. Power, in the context of self-leadership, is defined by clarity and agency. And if your thoughts are muddy and passive, you have no agency.
Okay, so this brings us to what you call the core mandate. If the mind is running the show, we need a decisive, almost an aggressive shift to regain control.
The mandate is one of self-leadership. Success starts by deciding to command the mind, not just to negotiate with it or, hope it settles down. You must wake up and preemptively command it before it has its chance to run off with nonsense. This means establishing control the moment consciousness returns. That critical first moment of the day, that's when you decide, are you the leader or are you the follower of your own thoughts? You have to actively choose what deserves your attention, and you have to refuse to allow those thoughts that weaken your position to even stay seated at the table of your consciousness.
That concept, commanding the mind, it sounds demanding, almost aggressive, like you said. So for the busy person listening, how do we practically differentiate between productive thought, the kind that moves us forward, and what we could call useless thinking, the mental junk?
That's an excellent and necessary distinction, because not all difficult thinking is useless. Not at all. The primary differentiation is defined by one thing: movement versus stagnation. Productive thought, even to its processing something deeply uncomfortable, always results in a clear next step, or a refinement of a solution, a course correction, a lesson learned. It resolves.
And useless thinking?
Useless thinking is always circling. It's repetition without any resolution. It's playing the same fear-based scenario for the 20th time without drawing any new conclusions or forming any kind of plan. Useless thought is essentially self-indulgent. It exists only to maintain the status quo of internal friction and distraction.
So if a thought loop starts and ends in the exact same place, it's useless. It doesn't matter how intellectual or important it might feel at the time.
Precisely. And this leads to a necessary strategy of rejection. You have to be almost ruthlessly aggressive in pruning your internal landscape. Not every thought, not every emotion or concern that bubbles up deserves your precious energy. It doesn't deserve a seat at the table of your focus. Some thoughts show up specifically to drain you, to make you feel small, or to distract you from the hard, rewarding work of clarity. You have to recognize them and push them out fast.
So don't even engage.
Don't engage. If you entertain them, if you debate them, you validate them, and they will return stronger next time.
I really appreciate the idea that the brain is, in essence, a sophisticated machine. It will just do whatever it is trained to do. If we've trained it to be distractible, well, it's going to be distractible.
It is pure pattern recognition. If you've trained your brain to chase distractions, to look for the easiest, most comfortable mental escape route whenever discomfort arises, it will execute that pattern perfectly, all day long. If you train it to react emotionally to minor inconveniences or setbacks, that becomes its default reflexive setting. The only way to change the output is through deliberate, systematic training. You have to be the guide. You have to train it daily to focus on goals, values, and strategic priorities. You correct it instantly, and you do not allow it to wander without your explicit conscious permission.
So when one of those useless thoughts tries to hijack our focus, the response can't be some lengthy internal debate. It has to be immediate.
Absolutely. This is what I call the fast filter. When a thought arises that you quickly categorize as non-productive or non-serving, the filtering process has to be instantaneous. You need to stop, recognize it, not judge it, just recognize it, and state either internally or even out loud, this isn't helping me, this is wasting my energy. Then you execute the psychological shift. And this shift is practical. It's not about forcing some empty optimism. It's about immediately pivoting your attention to practical, focused thinking about what matters right now. What is the next clear action I need to take?
This sounds like the true definition of discipline. We usually associate discipline with action, getting out of bed, going to the gym. But you're saying that discipline starts much earlier, in the mental space.
Discipline is purely mental first. You cannot expect yourself to take smart, disciplined actions to execute consistently if your head is full of noise and confusion and fear. Discipline is the deliberate cleaning of that mental space. It's creating room for clarity and strength, not for weakness and clutter. You have to be strategic enough to know the difference between thoughts that feed growth and thoughts that drain it. And you have to be strong enough, through repetition, to choose the right ones every single day. That daily decision is where discipline begins.
Okay, let's start laying out the structural framework then. The initial steps for this internal housekeeping. The materials we looked at identify 2 critical initial steps to establish this foundation.
Yes, the foundation requires 2 immediate foundational actions. And they have to be put into practice today. The first is pillar 1, become aware. We can call it the thought audit. This is truly non-negotiable. You cannot manage what you do not measure. You have to start paying deep, almost journalistic attention to where your thoughts go throughout the day. Notice the specific moments when you feel tired, or suddenly lost, or anxious, or maybe disproportionately angry. What was the trigger? What thought just popped into your head? That realization reveals the mental clutter that needs to be purged.
And is there a rule for that? A way to decide what to purge?
The rule for awareness is simple, and it must be applied rigorously. If a thought doesn't make you stronger or actively help you grow toward your goals, it is holding you back, and it doesn't belong. Awareness is the crucial first step. It's the light that reveals the psychological architecture of your habits.
And without that awareness, we can't even apply the second step, because the mind just has no consistent direction to follow.
Precisely. Which brings us to pillar 2, create structure. The anchor system. The mind is a wild, complex thing. If you leave it without explicit direction, it'll chase whatever noise or fear or distraction it encounters next. It needs anchors.
What do you mean by anchors? Physically writing things down?
Exactly. This means you must actively externalize your priorities and goals. Write them down. Literally give your mind a clear, tangible list of 3 to 5 key objectives to return to when it inevitably drifts. These aren't just things to do, they are psychological anchors that pull your focus back from the chaos. So when you feel yourself spiraling, you can refer to the anchor and say, wait, that spiral is not on my list. This is.
That makes perfect sense. The written goal isn't just a source of motivation, it's a navigational tool for the mind.
That's a perfect way to put it. Think of it this way. You rarely get lost in your physical location if you have a map and a destination. But mentally, people often try to navigate without either one. The structure provides the map and the destination. So when the mental engine starts wandering, you have a physical point of reference, a note on your desk, a 3-line memo that pulls you back to purpose.
So we have awareness, which is identifying the mental clutter, and structure, providing the navigational anchors. Now we have to transition into the sustained strategic training phase. This has to address external vulnerabilities, right? How do we prevent the mind from being weakened by the world? And what are the essential strategic habits for long-term control?
Yes, this phase is all about defensive discipline and consistent low-level repetition. We're moving from just clearing the room to actively guarding the doors and building the muscle that keeps the room clean.
Guarding the doors, I like that. So what's the first guard we post?
Pillar 3, stop feeding the mind junk. This is the input strategy. It's a concept of the mental diet. We all understand physiologically that a diet of junk food leads to a weak, lethargic body that performs poorly. Psychologically, the parallel is exact. If you constantly consume endless digital noise, or you allow reactive drama from others into your consciousness, or you just scroll through trivial nonsense, your brain actually degrades its ability to process complex, meaningful information. It starts to treat nonsense as critically important data.
That's a powerful parallel. So the implication is that the quality of your strategic output, your decisions, your clarity is directly tied to the quality of the input you permit.
Fundamentally so. You have to adopt a strategic approach and be smarter than just passively receiving whatever the world throws at you through your phone or through loud acquaintances. You must intentionally choose what media you consume, what podcasts you listen to, and crucially, which specific people you allow into your mental space. Your mind needs to be treated like a highly valuable resource, a fortress. If you don't fiercely guard the input, your capacity for clear, strong, original thinking degrades rapidly. You are actively weakening your own command center.
And once that defense is established, the training itself needs that consistent, almost tedious repetition. We're talking about forming deep, reliable mental habits.
Exactly. Pillar 4. Build strong mental habits. The repetition strategy. Mental discipline isn't a sudden, dramatic revelation. It requires continuous, incremental repetition, just like any physical skill. The common mistake people make is believing they have to jump immediately to, say, 2 hours of perfect monastic focus. But the research we reviewed suggests starting small. Dedicate just 5 minutes a day to absolutely focused thought. Sit with your goals and ask a single powerful question. What matters most right now, and what is the single next action toward it?
Why does starting so small, just 5 minutes, yield such disproportionately large returns in overall mental clarity?
Because you're focusing on building the muscle of return, not the duration of focus. The mind will drift. That is its nature. Consistency isn't about never drifting. It's about how quickly you can recognize the drift and execute the return. This repetition, the consistent act of pulling the mind back to the priority, makes the process easier and sharper over time. You stop chasing irrelevance, and the mental recovery time shrinks. You're teaching your mind through repeated action that you are the one in command, and the priority always wins over the distraction.
And once we've built that return muscle, we can move to Pillar 5, which seems like the most critical intellectual habit, challenging our own deeply ingrained internal stories.
Yes. Pillar 5. Challenge your thinking. The critical filter. This is where self-deception often lives. It's about refusing passive acceptance. Just because a thought showed up in your head doesn't make it true or accurate. Many of our most limiting thoughts about what we deserve, what we're capable of, or how hard something is, are based on old fears, outdated assumptions from previous failures, or just outright distortions of the current reality.
So we need to introduce a rigorous judicial review of our own mental output. How does someone practically interrogate a deeply held negative thought?
You must subject every incoming thought to 2 core non-negotiable questions. If a thought of doubt or fear or limitation arises, you ask immediately, Is this empirically true right now? And then, is this helping me move forward in this moment? If the answer to either of those questions is no, you treat it like noise. You toss it. You don't argue with it. Arguing validates it. You replace it immediately with a strong, useful, fact-based thought that's grounded in your goals and your direction. This active substitution process stops mental drift and prevents limiting beliefs from taking root.
Let's pull these 5 pillars together now into the single greatest requirement for strategic progress, which is focus.
Focus is the ultimate separating factor in life. The difference between those who achieve rapid, meaningful progress and those who remain confused and overwhelmed is focus. It's the disciplined ability to say a strategic no to 10 small, shiny, momentarily tempting things, and a resounding, unwavering yes to the one right thing that moves your life forward.
But in the middle of a busy, loud life where emails are screaming urgent and deadlines are shouting, how do we strategically define that one right thing that deserves 100% of our precious focus?
You have to elevate your perspective from merely urgent to strategically important. You have to ask the core question of high-level strategic living. What single activity, if I complete it successfully right now, will create the greatest necessary leverage or progress toward my ultimate destination? Not what is urgent, not what is loud, not what someone else is demanding, but what action aligns with my anchor system, with Pillar 2. Once that answer is clear, you must engage in the mental exercise of staying there with full attention, refusing to let your brain seek a comfortable escape. That refusal is the constant, low-grade exercise of mental strength.
And as we've established, this pursuit of sustained focus is going to feel unnatural, isn't it? Because the brain always defaults back to comfort and distraction.
That's the reality. Success is never easy. Sustained focus is not a natural state. The world is a constant barrage designed to pull your attention away. Therefore, focus is built not by achieving some mythical state of perfect, uninterrupted concentration, which is impossible, but by the relentless, quiet, consistent application of the muscle of return. When the mind drifts, you bring it back. When it drifts again 5 minutes later, you bring it back again. It is the mastery of the return over and over that builds unshakable mental discipline and progress.
Okay, we've established the framework for a quiet, intentional state, but the real test of this framework it's the chaos of real life. So how is true mental strength maintained when the phone is ringing, a client is demanding an answer, problems are rising rapidly, and emotions, both ours and other people's, are just loud? How do we identify our specific individual sabotage points and maintain our anchors in that real-world storm?
You've just hit on the transition point from theory to application. Anyone can focus when life is calm. Real, usable strength is built only when you can hold focus under pressure. You cannot afford to wait for ideal conditions. You can't wait for things to be quiet and perfect to practice this skill. You have to consciously commit to training in the chaos. This means deliberately exposing yourself to moderate discomfort, working on a hard task despite that slight internal resistance, and practicing that immediate return to your defined priority.
So if we're going to train in the chaos, we first need to diagnose the problem, a rigorous self-inventory of our specific weaknesses.
You must conduct a ruthless self-inventory. It's about knowing your triggers. You have to be brutally honest with yourself. What specific thing breaks your focus most reliably? Is it the subtle anxiety that's triggered by checking your phone, looking for validation? Is it a sudden fear-based projection about a future failure that just stalls you? Or is it comparison? Looking at someone else's highlight reel on social media and feeling inadequate. You have to pinpoint the exact mechanism that pulls you out of the now.
And the response, as you suggested, needs to be tactical, not just psychological. So if the trigger is external, the solution has to be physical or behavioral.
Absolutely. For every identified trigger, you need a precise physical or behavioral solution ready to deploy. For example, if the phone is the problem, the tactical response is to physically remove it from the room. Or use extreme lockdown settings, making the distraction physically impossible to access during your dedicated focus blocks. If the trigger is a vague fear or some pervasive worry, the strategy changes. You must write the fear down and challenge it with facts. You force the vague, shapeless anxiety into concrete, challengeable data points. If the trigger is comparison, the solution is self-evident. Stop consuming others' lives and redirect that mental energy back to living your own, focused on your actual tasks, not their perceived idealized success. You cannot afford to give your mind away to inputs that don't actively contribute to your growth.
The most insidious distraction, though, I find, often comes from within, the emotional hijack. When frustration or anxiety or even euphoria rises, it doesn't just distract, it tries to steal the entire day. It demands complete attention.
Emotional overload is a powerful and very common focus killer. Frustration, doubt, anxiety, they will try to claim total ownership of your consciousness. They'll turn the day into an exercise in managing that emotion rather than managing your tasks. The strategy here is crucial, the pause. When emotions rise, your initial reflex is to react or solve them immediately. Instead, you pause. Take a single deep breath. Acknowledge the feeling, I feel deeply frustrated right now, and that's okay. And then, and only then, you introduce the critical filter question. Does indulging this feeling right now help me move forward with my defined priority?
By pausing, we create that necessary distance, that space between the stimulus and the response.
Exactly. If the answer is no, you must choose a different, disciplined response. You choose to return to what matters, even when the feelings are intense and shouting for your attention. You train your brain to understand that clarity and purpose come first, preceding comfort or emotional release. The feelings are allowed to exist, but they are not allowed to lead.
The idea we touched on earlier that focus is a limited consumable resource seems vital here. If we accept that, we have to protect it like a financial budget.
That perspective is foundational to strategic self-leadership. Focus is a finite resource, and most of the distractions we entertain are genuinely not important. They just feel urgent because they're loud or new or demand instant gratification. We have to become hyper-selective about where we spend that limited cognitive budget. You must understand that focus is the essential catalyst that turns vague plans into concrete action, and consistent action into tangible progress. Giving your focus equally to everything is strategically identical to giving it to nothing. You must protect it fiercely, reserving it only for strategic priorities.
And finally, let's address that internal spinning we discussed. The mental spiraling that happens when we're sitting still, seemingly focused, but our minds are just lost in memory or fear or endless what-ifs. This is often the hardest distraction to remove.
The internal distraction of memory, fear, and what-ifs is, I would argue, the most challenging because it's inescapable. You could remove a physical phone, but you can't remove your own history or your own imagination. The strategy requires an immediate internal check. You have to stop and ask, am I thinking something demonstrably useful right now, or am I simply making myself overthink and invent problems? If it's overthinking, you must shift your internal focus deliberately to what is grounded in the immediate now your next visible step, the current paragraph you're reading, or the core value you're trying to embody.
So what's the best tool for that? For pulling yourself back to the now?
The single greatest anchor in this internal chaos, as we noted earlier, is the power of a stated intention. At the start of any work block, or at the start of the day, decide and state clearly, perhaps even write it down. In this next 90 minutes, my focus is this one critical task. This explicit decision acts as the guiding star, the unwavering anchor you return to immediately whenever the noise, internal or external, appears. You build focus not by magically achieving perfection, but by the consistent, quiet return to that stated commitment, time after time.
So we've established that the highest form of mental control isn't just reacting less, but deciding in advance what we're going to prioritize. It's moving from defense to, well, proactive philosophical leadership. How do we implement this philosophy of intentional thinking to become the true architect of our own thought patterns? And how does this mental discipline ultimately connect to the identity we're actively trying to build?
This final phase is what elevates the practice from simple task management to true self-leadership. It is about taking the steering wheel and aligning your entire psychological posture, your thoughts, your beliefs, your focus, with your highest aspirational vision. First, it's about steering the thoughts. You must internalize the reality that you are the driver of your thoughts. Thoughts that are unled, that are left on autopilot, always drift toward deep-seated habit, uncontrolled emotion, and unproductive repetition. They don't move forward. They simply circle and consume time.
So the passive thinker is always psychologically exhausted because they spend all their internal energy just walking in circles, repeating old arguments and old worries.
Precisely. To break that exhausting circle, we have to build proactive mental checkpoints throughout the day. These are momentary pauses where you just stop and conduct a quick internal audit. What am I thinking right now? Where's this thought taking me? Is it helping me or hurting me? This simple moment of conscious awareness gives you the split second of agency you need to turn the wheel. You then apply the standard we discussed. If a thought leads to fear, delay, or weakness, it's discarded. If it leads to action, truth, or strength, it's validated and pursued. This clear, repeatable standard of thought selection is built only through rigorous, consistent repetition.
This level of intentionality suggests that we have to establish control before the external world even has a chance to corrupt our focus, which means the morning is absolutely critical.
That is the power of the daily reset. You must reset your mental state with full intention every single morning. Do not start the day by reacting, by checking the phone, reading anxiety-inducing headlines, or engaging with external messages. Your first task is entirely internal. You must stop, think clearly, and remind yourself of the 2 or 3 things that matter most for that day. This proactive decision, this 5 minutes of internal clarity, it shapes your attitude, your effort, and your confidence for the entire day. If you skip the daily reset, you immediately surrender your internal edge and you start the day running behind.
You know, a huge source of self-sabotage, even for people who are otherwise disciplined, is the subconscious belief system we've inherited rather than actively chosen. How do we take intentional control of that underlying framework?
This is about choosing and protecting belief. Belief is fundamentally a choice. It's a powerful decision you make about who you are and where you are going. If you haven't consciously chosen your core beliefs, they are likely limiting you. They're derived from old failures or historical fears or the limiting opinions of others. You must actively select your beliefs. Beliefs that are rooted in growth, in competence, in courage, even if the evidence isn't fully in yet.
And once that strategic belief is chosen, it has to be fiercely defended.
Defended daily, against both inner doubt and external criticism. If you allow yourself to dwell on setbacks, your belief system shrinks. If you focus relentlessly on progress, however incremental, your belief grows. Real strategic belief doesn't need perfect conditions or guarantees of success. It needs commitment. The deepest reinforcement of that belief comes from action. When you consistently keep showing up, even when it's hard, you prove to yourself that you are capable. That consistent showing up strengthens the belief far more than any internal monologue ever could.
We often focus on what we do publicly for accountability, but the material really emphasizes the silent leadership required, the discipline that happens away from any applause.
Discipline when no one is watching. This is where true growth happens, where character is forged. Discipline is showing up for your own life. It's giving your thoughts direction, correcting your focus when you feel tired or unfocused or emotionally off, without any need for applause or external accountability. The standard must be strictly private. Do not entertain self-pity or unnecessary frustration or excuses in your private mental space. This consistent, silent leadership, when you hold yourself to your highest standard even when no one is watching, is what builds deep, unshakable self-trust. It's the quiet conviction that says, I can handle this. I lead myself regardless of the circumstances.
And this leads us to the ultimate transformative step, the final integration, aligning our present mental state with our aspirational self.
This is the decisive step for transformation. Think like the future self. Identity alignment. You must not wait for success to grant you permission to think differently. You must deliberately adopt the mindset, the confidence, the focus, and the discipline of the best version of the person you want to become right now.
So we use our future self, that highly intentional, successful individual, as the daily operating model for our thoughts. It's almost like a role model that is you.
Precisely. When you're facing a challenge or a distraction, you stop and ask, how would this successful, most disciplined version of me handle this specific setback? What would that version choose to focus on right now? Thinking at a lower, fearful, or hesitant level automatically sabotages your progress because you're acting out a past identity. Aligning your present thoughts with your future identity ensures that your mindset consistently matches your vision. The world follows those who lead themselves first, and that leadership begins by deliberately choosing the thoughts of the person who has already achieved the clarity you seek. That alignment accelerates personal and professional growth unlike any other strategy.
So we've journeyed through transforming the mind from what can be a chaotic, draining enemy into a disciplined, strategic tool. We started with that foundational choice, the mandate to command our thoughts, and we built a really robust framework based on these intentional habits. Radical self-awareness, the structural anchors, the power of the daily reset, strict input filtering, and finally, the transformative application of thinking from a place of future identity.
Mental control is not a passive waiting game. It's not about waiting for the right feeling or for perfect, effortless motivation. It is about actively taking full responsibility for your internal landscape and making deliberate strategic choices, one thought at a time, until that state of clarity and purpose becomes your new, powerful default. The strategy is now clear.
The clarity is profound, but I think for everyone listening, the implementation is the daily challenge that remains.
And that leads to the final provocative thought that you must carry forward from this deep dive. You now possess the comprehensive strategy to command your focus. But distractions, those internal whispers of doubt, and the external demands for your attention, they will never cease. They are permanent features of our environment. Therefore, the ultimate measure of your self-leadership and your mental strength is not how long you can hold a perfect, sustained, uninterrupted focus, but rather how quickly you can master your immediate return to your chosen priority when the inevitable noise tries to pull you away. This consistent, quiet, strategic return is the true birthplace of unshakable success.